Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we're going to spend most of our time talking about APIs. And if you didn't know what an API is, it's actually called, or it stands for Application Programming Interface. And you may or may not realize it, but you do use these quite often, probably without your knowledge unless you're the actual developer of it. We're going to talk a little bit about some definitions. What is an application programming interface? What are all the parts that actually get used inside it? So, an application programming interface is the connection between the user and the server, or between two servers or applications. And it allows us to have communication between two different applications or two different servers. Okay, so if you think of this analogy here, you think of a restaurant where a waiter becomes the link between the table that you're sitting at, or even the kitchen. And, from a programming perspective, you can think of it like a translator. So let's say you have one application that uses C#, the other that uses Java, and you want to have a communication link between the two. Okay, this is where you can employ an API. Okay, so some other terms that we need to talk about is REST. Okay, and that stands for Representational State Transfer. And it's a software architecture that defines a set of constraints to be used for creating web services. So when you use HTTP, the operations HTTP methods are available. And the most common ones that we have is get, put, post, and delete. And I want to make a note that REST employs JSON. And you may have heard in the past something called SOAP, but SOAP is the old standard. The new standard is REST, and it uses JSON, and SOAP used XML. And there are still legacy uses for SOAP, but more and more it's getting phased out to XML. Okay, and the other thing is, let's talk about really quickly put in the context of REST. Okay, so this replaces a resource at the known URI if it already exists. Okay, so this one will become a little bit more clear when we get into the actual programming piece. So if you're sending the same request twice, it's going to have no effect. Okay, so we use, as an example, REST for updates to an API. So I know that's a little bit of a terrible explanation of how that goes, but once we start to do it, you'll see it in a little more clarity. Okay, and a URI is another term that we have to be a little bit more comfortable with. So Uniform Resource Identifier. And it identifies a resource and works as a locator. Okay, so a URL is actually a subset of a URI. Okay, but a URI is not a URL. So you're familiar with a URI because you've done Google searches probably for years. But to think of maybe one good example, if you're taking pictures on your phone, okay, you want to retrieve those, there's a URI that's being used to locate that. That's the path that's going to get you to your photo on your phone. But it's not a web address. Okay, a URL is a web address, but a URI is more of a number. So what's another example? Let's say on a book, you've got an ISBN number for a book that you want to buy online, but you don't necessarily type in the URI number or the ISBN number into your Google browser. I mean, it can actually reroute you probably to a URL. Okay, you're just searching a random number, but it's gonna give you a result. But that's kind of an example where one is a number and one is more of a locator on a web browser. So a URL is a web browser locator. A URI is an item that's being identified. So the last thing I want to talk about on this slide is the HTTP status code 400. And you've seen this many times. It's a bad request. The web server can't interpret the request. And it could be one of two problems. It could be a syntax problem, or it could be a required parameter is not provided. So when you click on a link, it's missing something. So it can't really get you there. Okay, so the next thing, what I want to do is talk about this Postman. This is a REST client for calling or testing APIs. So what we're going to do is actually open up this Postman or postman.com, and we're going to go to downloads. We're actually going to download the application here. Okay. So if you clicked on that link, it'll bring you to this page here, download Postman. Okay, and I'm going to just do a download the app, and I'm on a 64. So it's finished its download. And what I'm going to do is do the installation. So if you're following along in this, I do strongly suggest that you also do the installation on this. So I do have to go in and actually create an account, but that's okay. So I've done the full registration and gone in, done all that stuff, and it's brought me now to this page. And there's some interesting things here on the page already. What you can see here is a bunch of lessons that you can follow up over here on the right. Some templates, some APIs, stuff like that. And then you can see there's things inside the menu. There's my workspace, collections, APIs, histories. So I haven't done anything yet, so obviously I don't have much going on my actual page. So go ahead and pause the video if you are in the process of doing the installation for this and then trying to get to this screen. So what I want to do today is try out some APIs. Then we're going to actually build our own API and use Postman again to test it out. So that's what the plan is going to be for this video. So I've opened up this website called Json Placeholder. And if you look at the URL up top, it's jsonplaceholder.tipico.com. And make sure that when you put it in, you add the HTTPS, because it'll take you to a sort of different version of this that's not secure. And what you can see on here is that it's as of December 2020, this was serving 1.8 billion requests each month. Okay, so it's pretty well used. And we're going to use this to do some testing or playing around with an API. So what is this thing? It's actually, it says it right here, a free to use fake online REST API for testing and prototyping. Okay. If I scroll down to the bottom, I want to show you these resources right here. So Json Placeholder comes with a set of 6 common resources, and these are called API endpoints. Okay, and it's important to understand that there's actually no front-end interface for the users. Okay, so they're sending and receiving things, but there's not like literally a graphical user interface for your API specifically just for the API. Okay, it could connect different user interfaces, but it doesn't come with its own actual user interface. So if these are going to be the endpoints here, and you can see posts, comments, albums, photos, to-dos, and users. Down here we have our routes. And this is where we talked earlier about post and put and get and delete. We've even got patch. Okay, so these now become our routes. And now notice I've got posts up here, and I can run a get on these posts. So these two, the resources and the routes go hand in hand. Okay, so you can see posts, one comment, and I can use the get method to do that. So I'm going to go back to here, and I've logged in to there. Sorry, I need to go back to my application. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to just do this new API. Can I do it this way? I think I can do it this way. So you notice here I've got these drop downs. I've got get, post, put and delete right here. These are the ones that I'm really going to focus on today, is just these ones. So I want to stick with the default get. Okay, and then I need to enter a URL. So if I go to here, if I go to this one here, and let's say, can I click on that? Yes. So I've clicked on post, and I'm going to copy that URL. So I'll go to copy, and then I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to paste that in there. Now you could see that when I was in this, that I've got all this JSON, and I believe there's about 200 of these. Okay, so if I go back to this here, and then I've got my URL in there, and I hit send. Okay, you're going to see right over here, I have this line right here where I'm pointing. It's pretty. And it's just basically reflecting everything that we saw in this URL as well. Okay, so I've done that, and I was looking for a message, and it's right here. It's called the 200 OK response. So you can see down here, it's in green, 200 OK. That's the status. So standard response for successful HTTP request. The actual response will depend on the request method used. So we're good there with what we wanted to do. So suppose I want just to get a single request. Okay, so for example, I've got number 10 here. I'm just going to say, if you look at my ID number 10, I could go to here and do the comment and say 10. Okay, and then I'm going to hit send again. And you see that it's just displaying for me that one specific ID. Okay. So this is similar to what we've seen before with our controllers. In the way we're using controllers and we're calling methods. Okay, very similar to what we've been doing in the past. So just to kind of further demonstrate what I'm talking about, I'm in the actual Georgian Groceries. And if I were to go, and you can see I'm in my products controller, but I go over and I click on details. I don't want to look at broccoli. Okay, I'm going to look at my favorite chips. So I hit details, and you can see it takes me products, details, and then item number 9. Okay, very similar to what we've done. And, you know, if for example, I were to say 900, okay, it brings me to this error page that I made a couple weeks ago, and it's just sitting in the background. It's not doing anything for you, but it's not important to this lesson, that's for sure. I just made it for fun. Anyway, if I go back and get rid of this, you can see it takes me right back to my the product number 9 that I was interested in. And if you want to know more about that error page that I made, it's in my GitHub repository, so you can go in and get that wherever I put it a few weeks ago. And so finally, just to further illustrate this, we've got post, but notice we've got post with a slash and then 1, and then we further subdivide that to post /1 /comment. So if I click on comments, it brings me to this here. Okay, so this is really that same sort of relationship that we've always been dealing with in terms of how we're routing in ASP.NET Core. So if I go back to this and I go up to my URL, and I know I believe in this one there's about 200, but let's say I add 2 zeros. Okay, I've got this expectation now that it's going to be a 404 not found. So just like I did with my Georgian Groceries, same sort of thing. The requested resource could not be found, but may be available again in the future. And the reason it would be available in the future is if, for example, if I actually had 1,000 records inside of this API. And I think as it stands, I've got 200. But as this API continues to grow and populate and persist in its database, it is conceivable that I could get into 1,000 posts. Now, you can imagine, let's say, all the comments that somebody might put into Facebook. Okay, there's going to be thousands, millions, probably millions per minute. Okay, but this could grow really quickly. But as it stands right now, I'm getting a 404 error because I don't have those records in there. But let's say if I do 100, I actually do have the record for 100. So again, I get a 200 OK. Now, what if I do ABC? What happens there? Okay, I don't have it, so but I'm getting a 404 not found, because conceivably I could end up with that as well. So I've gone over to the Spotify API, and you can see on the URL it's documentation web-api reference/artists. So I'm going to try this out in my Postman. So right down on the bottom here, I'm going to go to get v1 artists. You can see over here, it actually gives me the link. Okay, and it's defaulting to the get. So if I copy that and I go back in here, let's give this a try. And let's hit send. Okay, interesting. So you can see here that I'm getting this 401 unauthorized. And that's because Spotify's token, it says right here, no token provided. So it's not fully public. I have to get the token in this particular case. So if you read this, similar to 403 forbidden, but specifically for use when authentication is possible but has failed or not yet been provided. Okay, so I would need to get that token in order to run this or to connect to this API. If we look at Spotify's documentation for this, it's this authorization required, a valid access token from Spotify account service. See the Web API authorization guide for details. If we scroll down a little bit further, we're seeing what a response from the Spotify API would actually look like. So you can see this get and the URL here. Okay, and looks to me like this is probably the token in there. Or actually, I guess you have to put your token over there. But anyway, this is what the response would probably look like if you actually got the Spotify authorization to use this. Okay, and then there's some other examples of things that are in here. But right now, you can see that is in a JSON format. So I can't really think of a solid business case why I would want to do this, other than if I wanted to add it to my online grocery store and sell it as a product. I know you can go there and get, you can buy the cards. I can't remember what the cards are off the top of my head, but for downloading music and stuff like that, this is going to be my digital offering to the customers that are shopping on my webpage. So I could technically maybe link this in here if I wanted to set up an account and provide that now as a an offering to the public that are shopping on my website. Okay, but for today, I'm not going to do this. This is a little more complicated than I want to get into today, and I don't really feel like setting up an account, and nor should you. But I did want to show an example between something that is actually free to use to test around and play around with, and something that is an actual real business API for use inside your web application. Let's see for a moment what kind of an API we would want to use for this website. So for example, let's suppose people do purchase our products online on our grocery store, and we contract out maybe a delivery service. Okay, that's one example, because this is a grocery store, people are shopping online, and they can either pick it up or they can have it delivered. Let's say I'm offering delivery. Well, maybe there's a third-party contractor that I'm using as a delivery service, and they're using some sort of a website as well. So what we could do is create our API to connect so that this, say, third-party contractor could come in and connect to our website to get all of the orders that are posted and all the associated information in order to get that stuff into their hands. Let's say your website happens to use the post office. You want to be able to track items. We've done this before already when we do the Google login or the Facebook login. Those are examples of other services that are we're able to connect into using an API. So, we can not only create our own to extend the usefulness or the capability of our websites by creating our own API to allow others to connect into. But we can also set up the framework to, like we've done in the past, actually go and get that. So if we looked at our logout and I want to log in, here's an example right here. I can use my Google account to log in. So Google has extended their service to me in order for me to include Google on my website. And likewise, I can do the same thing if I want an outside service to be able to use my website. Okay, so why don't we go over to Visual Studio, get into the code, and start looking at ways to actually create an API for our own website. What I am going to do is create two API controllers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to controllers, right-click on controllers, right-click on that, add a new folder. Okay, and I'm going to call this new folder API. Okay, and you can see it appears as a folder underneath my controllers folder. There's not going to be a view for my APIs. There's no front end to this, okay? So the next step I want to do is go to my API. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to right click on it, add, and then over here I'm going to click on controller. I'm going to put a controller inside that new folder. And in this particular case, what I'm going to do is look for the API. So what you can see here is I've got an API controller empty, API controller with read-write action. And this is the one that I want to use. So controller with read-write actions, an API controller with REST actions to create, read, update, delete, and list entities. Okay, so that's the one that I want to choose. And you can see it's under common API, and it's this middle one here that I want to select. So in total, this is going to actually create 5 different methods in our application for us inside our controller. Okay, so I'm going to select add. So I get this dialog box, and what it's going to do is suggest the name values controller right down here. Okay, it'll be values. I'm going to leave that as the default. Okay, so I'm going to select add. And now you can see if I expand out my API, you can see that I do have this values controller in here. And of course, the file itself opens up. So what do we have inside here? I've got API controller, and I've got a get. Okay, I've got a post. I've got a put and a delete. Okay. If we look at the first get method here, you can see that it's actually calling this API values controller. Okay, and that's slightly different from the next one here where we've got the same thing. It's calling the values controller, but now it's also calling this, as an example, 5. Okay, so it's getting that ID 5. And you can see that this one here is returning strings. Okay, and this one is returning values. And this is what we were showing earlier when we were in here. And let me log into my admin. And we get to products, and I select on a product. Okay, so you're seeing this sort of repetitive pattern here in the URL. Okay, so when we look at 11, that's what we're talking about in our in this particular case. Okay, so that says 5 instead of 11 as an example. I'm going to go to my website, and keep in mind that I'm actually hosting this from Azure. So if I click on this and I go back to here, you can see that I've got it in here and I've hit the send button. Now you may, if you're doing this, have an issue because you can see where it's got the S, okay, for secure. So if I go on to File, Settings, and the third one down, if you're getting an issue with this, you may want to go ahead and, if you're running this on your local host, you may want to toggle that off. Okay, but in my particular case, I'm not going to. But if you're having an issue, go ahead and toggle that off. Okay, so let's keep going. At this point, what I want to do, because I'm running mine on Azure, what I want to do is actually update my GitHub so that it goes over to my Azure account and it persists in there. Okay, so I'm going to commit to my GitHub, and then it's going to update, and then we're going to proceed further. Okay, because right now GitHub doesn't know that I've added this API file. Now, if I go over to Postman and I put in my Georgian Groceries URL here, right? And I come back and I'm going to add this API/values in there, because without it, and I selected send, I was getting all this here, which is fine. This is perfectly fine. It's taking me really to my home page. I'm getting a 200 okay. But when I go to API values, okay, what I want to see is these two values in here. Okay, so now what I want to do is go back there. I've got API values, and I'm going to hit send. And now what you're seeing is I've got value 1 and value 2, which is exactly what this is here. Okay. And also note that I'm getting the 200 response rate over here. So in order to call the second get method here, this one, I need to just add a slash with an integer. So as an example, I'll do this. And what you're seeing is that it is in fact returning just the word value. Okay, so I'm getting this properly, and I'm still getting my 200 okay. Okay, and then here's the reason why we were talking about the 400 error in the past. So if I put in a string ABC and I try to do this, now I'm getting the 400 bad request. And this request cannot be fulfilled due to bad syntax. Okay, and you see the value ABC is not valid. Okay, so that's why earlier I wanted to just talk about the 400 error. And if we look in here, there's no get method that accepts that kind of a string. Okay, there's nothing in here that we have that can do that. So that's why you're getting the 400. That's a bad request. Okay. And then again, if I want to continue to check it, I can go into, right now I'm in Pretty, and I can go over to Preview, and then you're getting this message here. Okay, which is similar to the other one that we were getting about the valid ABC is not, or the value ABC is not valid. Okay. So really quickly, let's look at this post, put, and delete. Okay, if you notice here that get is almost identical to the way we've done this HTTP put, HTTP delete. Okay, their parameter is this ID. Okay, so now if I want to go back to here, what I can get is I'll take out this ABC, okay, and rerun this. And let's say I change this now to put, and I send that. Okay, I'm getting this 1. It's just returning a 1. If I put out delete, what's it going to run? Okay, it's also going to just show me a 1 right now. So the final one here is what we've got. We've got post, put, and delete. And let's do post. Oops. Okay, so we've posted. So we've got post, put, delete, and they're almost identical, right? But they just have differences in their parameter list, but also the method call is actually different. We just have to recognize that. So when I change that one little parameter, or this which method it's actually calling, I get a different result. Okay, and that's how we can test out each one of these. Next thing I'm going to want to do is actually create another API controller. Okay, and this one is going to be different, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. But I'm going to go into my API. I'm going to right click, add a controller. Okay, go back to APIs. And I want this one here, this API controller with actions using entity framework. And you read here, it says an API controller with REST actions to create, read, update, delete, and list entities from an entity framework data context. So I'll go ahead and I'll select add. So as you can see here, not only will we get those 5 methods again, but this time it's going to be connected to our database. The model that I want to use is actually going to be our cart. Okay, so we're going to just select our cart model. And by selecting cart, it automatically changed the name of my controller. Okay, so I'm going to hit add. So what I want to show you is that I had a couple of issues now that my cart controller is in fact there. And where I was getting this strange error in this area here. So I've gone ahead and I updated all of my package. And you can do that again in Tools, NuGet Package Manager, manage this, right? And you can see I've got all these, I had a bunch of updates that I wanted to do. So then I was trying to do the scaffolding and it didn't actually work. So what I was finding is that I was having a problem with this package here. So my solution was to actually remove it, okay? And knowing that it was going to come back on its own through scaffolding when I got back to doing the cart piece. The other issue that I had to do is if I go into any one of these, so I'm going to pick my Georgian groceries, because remember, this is another project inside our overall project. So if I right click on that and I go down to properties, it brings up this window here. And what I needed to do, because this was out of date, I needed to go to applications right here. This target framework, I was targeting the wrong framework. So you'll see down the bottom, if I target 3.1, I should get an error down at the bottom. And so this is what I was getting. So in order to change that, what I have to do is make sure that I've got the most recent targeted framework that matches up with the actual application as well. So if I go back to the top, you see all my dependencies in here are 5.0 or greater. Okay, so that's how to clear that error. Okay, so let me just close that. And you'll see now I've got my carts controller here. And within that, I have my API controller. And I've got get, just as similar as the other one that we had already looked at. So I've got get carts. I've got one here with this ID on the end of it. I have put. Okay, and put again is very similar to the way get is. And then I've got post and I have delete. Okay, so those are the 5 methods that I've got inside here. Now, when I scaffolded this out, my SQL Server package came back all on its own as part of the scaffolding. Okay, so I think what happens is you may already have that in there and they kind of bump into each other and it doesn't know which one to take. So I removed it so that when I scaffold it again, it automatically put it in there. So that should clear your error if you're getting one. So I'd like to draw your attention to one fact right now is that I have now switched over to my local host. And the reason I did that is, one, I want to turn off my Azure so I'm not wasting it. The second thing is to give you a good contrast between using it with Azure and not using it with Azure. So right now I'm in my local host right here, and I'm going to copy that. And I want to go back into, I want to go into here, and I'm going to make those changes. And in this particular case, what I'm going to do is call this one, it's going to be API /parts. CARTS, and I'm going to send that request. Okay, and this is what I was talking about earlier with this SSL. So what I want to do is go into here and into my settings, and the third one down, I want to turn that off. Okay, and then let's see if this will work again. Okay, so what you're seeing here is, and if we put that into pretty, what you're seeing is it's actually going and it's getting the items that I have. Okay, so in this particular case, if I go to my products, or it could be my categories, I don't really know, just really quickly looking at it right now, which one it is. So it looks like it's cart ID 1, product ID 9, okay, and quantity 1, price. So it's really interesting. It's actually going to my shopping cart, and it's looking for the items that I have in my shopping cart. Okay, and I don't have anything there right now, but it is looking at these particular items. And if I can expand this and get a better clue, these are actually old cart items from my customer. So if I were to go back in and log in under my customer, right now I'm in admin, that's what it would go and actually get. Okay, so that's the one that it's actually retrieving at the moment. And so one of the issues is, as I'm going back and forth between my Azure and my local host, I'm going to get different things persisting in the database. Okay, one is going to be stored over in Azure, one of them is going to be stored locally. Okay, so that's one of the issues, and I wanted to go back and forth just to kind of make you aware of that as well. Okay, so what's happening is this one goes back to, I think it looks like November 10th is when this one was done. This one was December 2nd. Okay, it looks like 11:30 at night. So it looks like I was working on this at that point. So what's this one here? December 2nd again. So again, you can see it's under my customer account. This one here is just a GUID. It doesn't specify yet. So I must have made that before I had the other accounts, or before I did all the authentication stuff. So it's all in there, and you can see that it's being itemized by this cart ID, product ID, and customer ID. So this is basically all of the information that it's going in and looking at. It's getting, you can see here, it's getting from my database on my local machine. And of course, if I want to look at just one specific cart record, I can add this parameter. So you can see down here on line 12, it's 5. So I'm going to just type in 5 there, and I'm going to go get that. And you can see that it just isolates that one individual one that I was looking at. And naturally, if I try to add something that doesn't exist, okay, I'm going to put item 500. It doesn't exist. Okay, and you can see over here, I'm getting this 404 not found. Okay, subsequent requests by the client are permissible. So you can see that. So let's go back to 5. So what I would like to do is test out my post, put, and delete, just to test them out and make sure that they work. So the way I'm going to test this is that first and foremost, I'm going to create a new cart object. Then I'm going to update it, and then after that, then I'm going to delete it. So the way I want to do this is I want to actually take all of this in here, and I'm going to copy it. So Control C, I'm going to copy that. And we're going to go back up here, and I'm going to take out the / and the 5. And I want to go over to body right here on the tab. Next, I'm going to go to here and change this to post. Okay. And then you can see these little radio buttons here. I'm going to switch this to raw. Okay. And then that's set to text right now. But what I want to do is change my raw from text over to JSON. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste this in here. Okay. And now I want to make some changes. So I will keep this as 2020 12. I'm going to change that to the 3rd. Okay. So the next day. And there's some stuff I need to take out. Now, because this cart ID, it actually comes from the API, or it comes from the database. I'm going to remove that as well. And I'm actually going to change my customer ID to be, I'm going to change this to say API tester. Okay. Okay, so I'm at this point, and now there's, the possibility that something will go wrong, but I'm going to give this a try. Okay, so I'm not changing this line. I'm going to go to send, and let's see what happens. Okay, so what I have is a 201. The request has been fulfilled and resulted in a new resource being created. Okay, so that's really good. Now, down here at the bottom, you're seeing that I've got my new object, and it's got a new cart ID object that was given to me by the database itself. And it's now number 9. Okay, and not to be confused with that bag of chips that I was using before. That's not what we're talking about. So now I've got the new updated cart ID 9 for this API tester customer. So naturally, if I want to test this one more time, what I can do is reset back to get, okay, and then I can try and call that number 9. So my / number 9, and I hit send, and you're seeing exactly that now. Is this this cart ID number 9, and you can see I'm at a 200. Okay, so if I were to take out these and call that, you can see I've got number 1, number 5, number 6, and now number 9 is my API tester. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually try and copy that object, and then I'm going to try and update it. So I'm going to highlight it, Control C again. If I want to simulate different conditions within the API, I can go in and do some stuff around here. So if I go back to my body right here, and I'm going to change that to 90, and then I'm going to take the quantity and I'm going to just change that to a 1. Okay, I just updated the quantity. So I am expecting that I'm going to get some sort of an error, but what I want to do is go to here and then do a put. Okay, I wanted to switch that to put. I've changed that to 90, and I've changed my quantity here to be a 1. Okay. I am expecting it'll be something like a 400. Okay, good. It was a 400 bad request, okay, that you can see here. Let's go into the code and look at what happens with the put. Okay, what you're seeing is we've got an ID and we've got a cart. Okay, and with our bad request, if the ID is not equal to the cart ID, okay, we get a status of a 400 bad request. What are we getting right now? Okay, a 400 bad request. And then we've got this try catch block. Okay, and down here, if it works, we're getting a status of 204, no content response. Okay, that's one possibility there. Here you're getting again a 404, not found, within the try and the catch. Okay, so there's different scenarios that are happening inside this as well. So going back to the original one, the bad request, the 400 error, which is what we're getting, is because we've got the ID and the cart object itself that are not matching. So when we go to here, we're seeing that the cart ID and the object ID they weren't matching at all. Okay, because I've got 90 here, and this should be an actual 9. Okay. So if I go back and I fix that URL, okay, and then I change my quantity back to 2 because I think that's what it originally was, and then I do a send, okay, I'm still getting this request here. But there's one more issue here that what I'm missing. I was actually missing this cart ID. Okay, so I didn't properly probably paste it back in here, which I should have, exactly, because I didn't realize that the cart ID wasn't missing. But I need to have that cart ID in there to make this work. So if I hit the send button now, I should be getting my 204 content. So really quickly, trying to do it this way. And quantity 1, this should get me the wrong answer again. Okay, so I got the bad request. But again, if I fix that, I'm just fine. Okay, and now I got my 204 no content. So the only way for me really right now to know if my method actually ran, because what this says is, it says 204, the server successfully processed the request, but is not returning any content. So how do I know? So, the best part is I can change one of these, okay, to get. And then if I run that again, you see that I'm getting it. I get a 200 OK. So just to sort of prove that the way we're doing this, if I do this put and I make that change, let me try and change that back again to 1 again. Okay, so I'm going to hit that send. I'm getting the 204 no content. Okay, and notice it's a quantity of 1. Let's go back to get. Okay, we're going to hit get again, and then I'm going to hit send. And you notice here that it did in fact update. Okay, so you can kind of validate that it is actually working through this method. And I'm not going into my database and checking it that way. I'm just doing it all through Postman. And the last thing I said I wanted to do was delete this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay in body. Okay, keep everything as it is right now. And I'm going to do my delete request. Okay, and remember this has a quantity of 1. Okay, and a cart ID of 9. So I'm going to hit send. Okay. Now, if I want to go back to get and I'm looking for 9. Don't forget, I just deleted number 9. Okay, and before I did that, I was in a 204, no content. Okay, so now I'm going to hit send. And you see that I'm getting this 404. The requested resource could not be found, but may be available again in the future. Okay, so basically what it's saying is, hey, that new one that you created in the past for number 9, it no longer actually exists. So when I take away these slashes and we go through again, I've got card ID 1, 5, 6, and that's it. Okay, and notice that there's no more customer ID that would be called API tester. I want to take a minute and go into our Solution Explorer for a minute. Okay, because just to be perfectly clear, it's possible that I have 2 cart controllers. Okay, and you can see in here, I don't actually have another controller called cart or values. I could have. And the reason I can have those controllers with the same name is because I've separated it by a different file folder or directory. Okay, so my cart controller could just as, I could have had a controller or needed a controller for carts if that was possible. Like here's an example. Maybe my API was for the products controller. Okay, but I would have had this product controller in there, and then I would have created another one inside here. Okay, but I don't have to do that in this particular case, but I just wanted to make sure that that was perfectly clear. The next thing I want to do is talk to you about documentation. Because at some point, somebody is going to want to use an API that you create. That's if you've made the decision to create an API for your web application. But you've got to give a potential developer some direction on how to do it. You have to tell them what all your endpoints are going to be. And just like in the beginning of this, we looked at all the other endpoints for that free open source one. You've got to give that sort of level of fidelity to other developers to understand what you're doing. And so there are a couple of resources we're going to use. So you've got, option A is you get out Microsoft Word and you start drafting up all the documentation to it, which could be extremely time consuming. And not only that, with the time consuming, if you make a software update to your application, then you have to go back and update your documentation for your API. So one of the answers to that is something called Swagger. Okay, and this is the website for Swagger. But before we look at that, I want to actually look at this here. This is some information from Microsoft on what Swagger is. Okay, so ASP.NET Core Web API documentation with Swagger Open API. Okay, and it's about a 2-minute read. It was published October 29th. So it's really good. It's really worth getting in there and having a look at this. Okay. And it's a good article to kind of get more of a background than I'm going to give you in this video. But at the very least, I've pointed you in the direction of this resource. Okay. Now, you'll see down here that there is 2 different types of implementations here. So the 2 main open API implementations for .NET are Swashbuckle and NSwag. Okay, and we are going to use the first one, Swashbuckle. Just funny kind of trying to say that one. Okay. So the best option for us here is to just do what this tells us. I clicked on the Swashbuckle link and it brings us to here. Okay, and it gives you instructions on how to go through and do all this stuff. So it's a couple of lines of code plus some package installations. Okay. You can see here it's giving you options from Visual Studio. Okay, and if you do it from your package manager console, you can do it this way using your PowerShell, or the other way is from your managed NuGet packages. And that's usually the way I prefer to do it there. So I'm going to copy this NuGet.org just in case I need it. Okay. Once we do all that, then we've got our startup.configuration services, and we're going to have to add a few lines of code in our startup file. Okay. Now, what do we hope to gain by getting all this? Well, I'll tell you, the beauty is it's going to actually create the document built right into our website for us. Okay, to help other people understand what all the endpoints are and how to use our particular API. Okay, and it's going to embed that right into the website. And of course, I made a little bit of a mistake earlier on. I'm not looking for this NuGet.org. What I'm actually going to be looking for is swashbuckle.asp.NET Core. So that one I'm going to copy. Okay, so let's go back to Visual Studio. Let's go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager. Go to this middle one, Manage NuGet Packages. And I want to go over to Browse. And within Browse, that's where I'm going to paste that one that I was looking for. Okay, and it looks to me like it's the one at the very top of the entire list. 76 million downloads, and it looks like version 5.6.3. Swagger tools for documented APIs built on ASP.NET Core. And with this, I'm going to select that one there and make sure that I've got Georgian Groceries on it. I don't need it for the Georgian Groceries test folder. I just need it here. I'm going to switch over to my Solution Explorer, and I'm going to keep the default latest 5.6.3. You can see that it's not installed, and I'm selecting Georgian Groceries, and now I'm going to hit Install. And I'll probably have to agree to the terms. There it is. I accept. Okay, and I don't see any errors, and I'm going to go to my packages, and you can see right here at the bottom, it did indeed install. And it installed 5.6.3. Okay. I'm going to close this out because it's installed. And if we look back at the instructions, where did I have those pesky instructions? Right here. We need to be in our startup file and then go get a couple of lines of code in there as well. So back to Solution Explorer, and I'm going to close these down, and I want to be in my startup file, which is right here, this startup. Okay. So we're going to need to add to this configure services, and then also a little bit further down, we've got to address the UI. Okay. All right. So if we look back at this particular document, okay, we're in configure services, and then we got to go into configure and do some modification in there. Okay. I'm going to go to the very bottom of my configure services method. Okay, which is this one here, and I'm going to the very bottom of it. Okay, and then I'll add a few lines there. So right here, I'm just going to type in a comment, and I'm going to say register Swagger generator for the API documentation. Okay, and simply I'm just going to say services dot add. Let's see if it shows up. Swagger. There it is. Swagger gen, and that's a method and a semicolon. So let's go back to here. And this is this line right here that we added. Okay. I could have taken the note out of there as well, probably. And while I'm in here, I'm actually, no, I'll hold off on that. Yeah, so while I'm here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entire block, and I will make a little bit of a change to it. So I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back into here, but I'm going to go into configure, but I'm going to go right down to the very end of configure. Okay, and I'm going to actually, sorry, I missed a little piece to that. I needed to get this as well. Okay, I'm going to copy all that, go back into Visual Studio, and now down below this, I'm actually going to just paste all of that in there. But I do want to make a little bit of one little change. I'm just going to change this to options. Okay, and then same thing here, copy and get rid of the C. That's a user-defined thing. And I've got Swagger endpoint and this whole line of code. So I'm literally taking everything out of there. And I'm going to change the title. So this is going to be the title that we see is going to be Georgian Groceries API V1. Okay. So I'm going to save that. Okay. The reason I'm going to leave in the V1, and I changed that to lowercase, it's just nicer, V1, is just because anytime I come back and I'm going to make any updates to this, or I have to make any adaptations to my endpoints or anything like that, then I can update which version this is. Me personally, I like V1 of, let's say 1. Okay, if I was up to version, I don't know, 20, maybe it would be version 20 of 20. Maybe you would be looking at version 18 of 20. Okay, so you want to know that you're up to date. Either way, I can just say version 1. It doesn't really matter all that much. It's however you want to do it. What I'm going to do, the final thing right now, I guess, is I'm going to go to build, and I'm just going to do a build solution. Okay, and when that's done, building that, you can see 2 succeeded, 0 failed, so that's great. So now I'm going to go back out to my URL, and I'm actually going to now do / Swagger. Okay, and that should be it. Okay, so there you see it. We've got within Swagger, we have all of the different documentation, right? So order details, category, products and cart. Okay, so you're getting a lot of information out of this. So if we go to the get post and I click on that, you can see everything that it actually looks like. Now, of course, if I minimize this, just remember that it's actually showing me two different controllers. Okay, I've got my carts one and I've got my values one. Okay, let me just really quickly refresh that so you can see that in my carts controller, I've got get, post, get again with the ID, put in delete. Same thing with my values. Okay, and then you're just looking at these different schemas. Okay. Now, even with this, I can almost use it in the same way I used Postman. Okay, if I click on this, my get for my carts, you can see I've got a 200 response saying no parameters. Okay, this is what it looks like. What are the different, okay, if I want to say application JSON, it didn't really do much of an update there. Schema, open that up or close that, whatever. Okay, let's go down to this one to get. Let's look at this one. Try it out. Execute. Ah, no ID. That's okay. I'd have to type in an ID. Let's say 1. Execute. Okay, and then you're getting a response based on that. Okay, yeah. So, you know, here it is. Let me change this one. I think we were using 9. Is that, if that's correct? Okay, it's not found. I don't have one for 9. Let's go with 5. Okay, and there it is. So customer ID and then a quantity of 2, price of 4. This is what that was. So this matched up perfectly with what we did with Postman. So you can see the value of this. Like, imagine having to try to go in and actually write all this documentation and create a lot of the information about this. Okay, because now at this point, just by adding the package, adding this line of code with the other line of code above it, and then this Swagger UI, it's done all of that stuff for us, and it also allows us to test it out. So I think that is pretty phenomenal. It's incredibly useful to us and saved us an enormous amount of time. So there you have it. That's how we're actually able to develop the API for this particular website. And just to conclude this whole entire project or this series of videos, it's been really fun. We've done quite a lot of interesting things. But I'm happy to say that I think this is as far as I'm going to go, or I'm going to take this with this entire project. So if you've been watching because you have to versus because you want to, thank you very much for watching. And this will not be the last time I do one of these kinds of videos. I don't know exactly when the next one is, but it'll be sure to come. So anyway, I just wanted to thank everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next series. Thanks.